All right. Welcome everybody to Wellness Wednesdays. Thank you so much for coming. I believe that you all have been here before, so I don't have to do the normal introductions. So it seems like we have a little bit smaller group today, but that's okay. I still hope it'll be helpful for you guys. Maybe this week is just super busy for a lot of people, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about the power of thought. Really, we're talking about our brain being really powerful, but then we specifically want to focus on thoughts and really negative thoughts and how, sometimes those can kind of rule our lives. And we want to learn how we can manage those in a productive and healthy way. Okay. So why are we talking about this? So a few reasons specific to COVID and then otherwise. So the first reason is because we know that the most common way that COVID-19 has impacted college students right now is by impacting their stress or anxiety levels. So we know that the stress and anxiety can be induced by maybe having to go home for the semester or because of maybe financial, repercussions of the disease or whatever it may be. But we know that student stress and anxiety levels are really high. And then kind of along a similar note, we know that over half of adults in the US reported that COVID-related stress or worry has negatively impacted their well-being or their mental health in some capacity. So that could be, general well-being, maybe like their sleep, and then also thinking about their mental health. So potentially using, alcohol or something like that in order to cope with what's going on right now in our country. And so what we know about stress and anxiety is that both of those things start in the mind, right? We can definitely have physical expressions of those things, like if our stomach starts to hurt, if our heart starts to race. But ultimately, those emotions and those responses start with our mind and kind of how we're interpreting the world around us. And then thirdly, we know what we can control, right? So going back to what Brennan talked about last week about resilience, he said something about how one of his mentors told him, there's only three things in this world that we can control. It's our actions, our reactions, and then who we trust in this world. And so today what we're really going to focus on is the first one, so our actions, and specifically our thoughts, because our thoughts dictate what we do in the world, whether these thoughts are conscious or subconscious. So what we're going to talk about today is cognitive reframing. So that's just a really fancy word for what we're going to do, which is thought challenging. And so not accepting our thoughts as, strictly true, because our thoughts are just that, they're thoughts. They could be true, they could be based in reality, or they might not be. And then a thought challenging is really, it's just a technique to help identify and challenge the thoughts that we have. A lot of the time we don't need to challenge positive thoughts, right? So it's really those kind of negative thought spirals that we can find ourselves in. If traffic is terrible, we start to complain about that, or if somebody, seems really distant, towards us, then that could be something too, where we start to think like, oh my gosh, maybe it's me, maybe I'm the one, the reason why they're upset, but it could be just that they're having a bad day, right? And so it might not have anything to do with you. So really, we're just going to talk about how we can challenge our negative thoughts. And so I don't know if anyone has seen Meet the Robinsons, but it's a really great movie. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. But this animation is a little clip from that movie. And so there's a character named Goob, and Goob is the boy. Oops. I think I just changed it. Okay. Can you all still see my screen? I'll do it one time just to make sure. Okay, so Goob is the little boy in red. And so at this point in the movie, he's an adult and he's reflecting back on his childhood. And so, in his mind, it's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but in this man's mind, his childhood is really hard. People were really mean towards him. But you can see in the upper half of this image, his friends are saying, hey, Goob, what's up? Cool binder. Or, hey, want to come over to my house today? So these kids are being really friendly towards him. And then you can see kind of more, humorously, he says, they all hated me. So it's kind of a funny way of showing that our minds have a lot of power over how we see the world. And what our minds and our thoughts are telling us may not actually reflect the reality that we're in. So what we're going to do today is we're going to put our thoughts on trial. So we're going to really evaluate whether or not our thoughts are real. So excuse me, I'm a little just continuing to let people into the thing. All right, so we're going to talk about, okay, what are our thoughts real or are they not? And I'm going to walk through how we're going to do that. So there's seven steps to this process, and it looks a little daunting, but don't be afraid. It's actually pretty I think easy to kind of follow along with. So first, we're going to talk about what's the situation we're in. And then we're going to rate the intensity of the emotion that we're experiencing. Obviously, we know life can make us experience multiple emotions, but we're really going to focus on just one. And then we're going to talk about hot thoughts and what those are and what our hot thoughts could be that's driving the emotion that we're experiencing. We're going to act as the prosecutor of our thoughts. We're going to act as the defendant of our thoughts. And then we're actually going to be the judge too. We're going to evaluate whether this thought is true or not. And then lastly, we're going to re-rate the intensity of the emotion that we're experiencing after we've gone through this process. So for those of you who are just joining, welcome. We're today going to talk about how we can really challenge the negative thoughts that we start to have. And the reason why we do that is because we know that instinctually we tend to believe our negative thoughts over positive ones. So kind of a classic example you can think about is if you are in a meeting with your boss or with your professor, and you're in a meeting with your boss and your boss tells you 4 things you're doing really, really well in your job, the things that they have seen you grow in and excel in, and they really compliment you on that. And then they have one thing that they want you to grow in. They think there's one thing that's maybe being a challenge for you, that is something that you need to develop more skills in so you can get better at it. So what are you going to focus on after that meeting? Well, of course, it's the one thing that you're not doing well, right? It's that one thing that is a weakness for you. And so that's just kind of what our minds do, instinctually. I'm not really sure if it's a good thing or not, but that's something that we focus on, is the negative part. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of challenge our negative thoughts. We're going to see, okay, what's true about this thought that could be evidence that it's true, and then what are some things that we might not be looking at, we might be overseeing or overlooking more so, that could kind of help us weigh whether this thought is accurate or not. Okay, so step 1 is we're going to evaluate the situation. So right now, I want you all to think about the situation that you're currently in, if you're experiencing a hard situation. So typically, this is something that's inducing some stress for you, some anxiety. It could be job related, it could be school related, it could be something in your family or like a relationship, but something that's causing you stress. And if you don't currently have a stressful situation going on, just think about the last time that you were experiencing a stressful situation. So I'll give you a second to think about that. Okay, so you have your situation in mind. Now I want you to describe the situation to yourself, and think about how you would explain it to a friend. And so, what are the details of it? What's going on? What's the context of your situation? And then I also want you to identify the strongest emotion that you might be feeling because of this situation. It could be stress. It could be anxiety. It could be, sadness. It could be fear. It could be anger. So I want you to take a second and identify that emotion. Okay. So as we're going through this, I want to walk you through an example from my own life. No, this is not my dog. I wish it was my dog. But this is the example I'm going to give you from my own life. So the situation that I have currently found myself in is that my husband and I just started our search for getting dogs. So we both are dog lovers, and we don't have them yet. And so we really wanted to get dogs. My husband really loves Chihuahuas. Don't ask me why, but he loves Chihuahuas. And then he's looking at me right now. And I really love Golden Retrievers. I grew up with them, and they're just really, really sweet dogs. If anyone's ever had them, they're the best dogs. So that's really what I wanted. So once we kind of decided, okay, now's the time to get dogs, I started, excitedly looking for Golden Retriever puppies, in the area, the breeders and stuff. And so I looked in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, all the surrounding states to really try to identify, a breeder that we could look for. But little did I know how difficult it was to get a golden retriever puppies. And so because I grew up with golden retrievers, I thought that they were, you could just get them, off a street corner or something. I just thought they were like a dime a dozen. But every breeder I contacted has a wait list. And so for me, it's like not only do I want a golden retriever, I want that puppy now. I don't want to wait 6 months to a year for a dog. I want to, want to have it now. So I didn't realize how difficult it was to be able to get a dog that we wanted. And as the search continued and as it got harder and harder, I got more and more hopeless. I started to feel, a lot of emotions, but really kind of the primary one was hopelessness. So that's kind of the situation, I found myself in recently. So our second step in this in kind of putting our thoughts on trial is we want to rate the intensity of the emotion that we're in. And so on a scale from 1 to 10, I want you guys to think about the emotion that you identified a second ago and put a number to it. Generally speaking, what's the intensity? 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. All right. So for me, I'll tell you, sorry, I'm still letting some people in. For me, what I'll tell you is my intensity was an 8, right? So again, I was experiencing hopelessness, feeling like we're never going to find a dog. And so that's kind of that's the emotion that I was feeling. So our third step is we want to identify a hot thought. So what are hot thoughts? Hot thoughts are kind of the automatic thoughts that we have. Usually they're subconscious. We don't really think about them, and they're not usually based totally in reality, but they're usually what's driving our emotion. So I realized after I was kind of putting this together that it's ironic that it's called a hot thought, and I used an iceberg as an example. But I think it's still helpful. So thinking about the emotion is usually something pretty easy that we can identify, right? We're feeling really stressed, we're feeling really anxious, we're feeling really angry. But then the hot thought is usually something that's kind of underneath that's driving that emotion. And a lot of the times hot thoughts are very extreme, and they're not something that we really recognize right away. They're also something that can be pretty uh, extreme in the sense of using language like, we're always going to feel like this, or it's never going to happen, or this person is never going to change. So they're usually kind of, those kind of more extreme type words that we use, like always or never. So a hot thought is usually, again, what's driving that emotion that we have. So for me, my example of a hot thought is we're never going to get a dog, right? So that's kind of that, again, that kind of emotional or that kind of more extreme thought of this is never going to happen, right? That's not probably true, but that's the thought that was driving that hopelessness that was causing me to think that way. So I want you guys to take a second, think about what a hot thought could be that's driving the emotion that you were experiencing because of your situation. Okay. So hopefully you've been able to identify, a hot thought, and you could have more than one, obviously, but I think for the sake of kind of walking through this exercise, it's easiest to identify just one that's probably the most prevalent. So these are some examples that you could have if you had a hard time kind of trying to think of one for yourself. These could be examples. So, no one cares about me. That could be one, which could especially be prevalent if you're, maybe living by yourself, or even if you're living with somebody else, feeling like people are not reaching out to me as much as I thought they would during COVID. And then, another one could be my parents are going to catch COVID. Another one could be life is never going to return to normal. And then, a fourth one is I'm never going to make ends meet, right? And so some of these can be related to what we're going through right now as a country, or it could be not, finances could be hard, whatever is going on worldwide, that could be, hard for us personally. So these could be typical thoughts, again, kind of looking at those kind of finality type, statements of no one does, no one cares, or I'm never going to, be okay with money, things like that. So our fourth step is we're going to be the prosecutor of our thoughts, right? So we have our hot thought. We're going to be the prosecutor. So first, we're going to identify what is the evidence that our thought is true, right? Because the goal of this exercise is not to say, don't have any negative thoughts, turn them all into positive thoughts. Life is great. Life's all rainbows and butterflies. No, we all know that's not true. We all know life can be really hard. So it's no point in lying to ourselves and only trying to, think positively. Actually, positive thinking has been proven to not be very helpful in terms of relieving anxiety. So it's best to be honest with ourselves, right? So what is the evidence that our thought is true? There's always a reason why we're thinking something. So I'll give you again an example from my life and what I'm going through. So, my hot thought again is we're never going to get a dog. These are some of the evidences for that thought that I was able to identify. Every breeder I've contacted has a waiting list, so that's pretty distressing for me. I've searched for breeders for a few weeks and nothing has come up that's in our price range. That's another thing I didn't realize is that golden retriever puppies are very expensive. I did not know that. And then thirdly, we're not going to find a place to live that allows pets, which I didn't really, mention a lot of that part of it. But we were living in an apartment that didn't allow for dogs. And so we thankfully were able to find somebody to take over our lease, but nothing was turning up, living wise for us in the area that we wanted to live in our price range. And so that was really distressing because I was like, forget trying to get a dog. We're not even going to find a place to have a roof over our heads. And so these are kind of all the evidences that were really stressing me out, kind of making me feel hopeless, making me think that this hot thought was accurate. So that's our prosecutor stance, right? That's kind of what we're trying to identify as accurate. So now we're going to be the defendant. What's the evidence that our thought is false, right? So again, we're not trying to say just dismiss your negative thought, forget that, and only focus on positive. No, we want to identify the things that could be true about it. We also, what we're doing as the defendant, though, is we want to kind of zoom out and try to identify what are some things that our minds might be overlooking, right? Again, thinking back to the example of we have a meeting with our boss, we only focus on the negative, right? We kind of dismiss all the positive things that our boss said to us, but we're only focusing on the negative. So really what we're doing as the defendant, we're just trying to zoom out and identify what other things could be true that I'm not seeing. So again, examples from my life that I hope are helpful. Kind of countering or other evidence that, we could be looking at, Goldens are really hard to come by right now, maybe because it's COVID and everybody wants a pet, right? And I've read articles about that, more and more people are getting dogs and cats and stuff because they don't have anything else to focus on right now during COVID and everyone's stuck at home. So it could just be that, maybe golden retrievers are easier to come by when our country is not in a pandemic. And then the second, a second kind of evidence that maybe I'm overlooking is that, I've only been looking for a few weeks. And so it just might take longer than I anticipated. Maybe I just, had kind of unrealistic expectations about how hard it would be. And then thirdly, for the housing situation, we reach out to a lot of different places that are potentials. And, everyone's probably really busy right now and they just maybe haven't been able to get back to us about our inquiries. So again, we're not trying to dismiss the things that we talked about when we were the prosecutor, but now as the defendant, we're just wanting to say, okay, what else could be true that maybe I'm overlooking automatically? And then the second to last step is that we want to be the judge of our thoughts, right? So a judge, remember thinking about the role of a judge is you want to take the evidence from both sides and then come to a conclusion of what is probably the most true of the situation that's going on. So that's what we're going to do. But instead of, doing what a judge normally does, we kind of, in the context of, thought challenging, our goal is we want to develop a new, more flexible thought, right? So again, it's not dismissing the hot thought saying that's wrong, but it's just trying to make it more flexible and see what else could be accurate in this situation. So again, the example of all the kind of putting all the evidence together, this is kind of the combined evidence. It's true that the search for a golden retriever puppy has been difficult, but it could be primarily due to the season that we're in, right? So putting both of the kind of the evidences together. It's true that finding a breeder within the price range that we have is hard, but that doesn't mean there isn't one out there right now. Or kind of alternatively, I didn't write this down, but it could just be that we need to wait a little bit longer, save up some money, and then be able to buy, a dog. Or, for our kind of our third category of housing, we've inquired about many different places and just need to be patient in hearing back. So again, just trying to put evidence from both sides together to kind of come up with, okay, what is holistically true about the situation that we're in. And once we've put all of the evidence together, then what we do is we evaluate what our old hot thought was, and then we kind of create a more new flexible thought. So what my old hot thought was, we're never going to get a dog, right? Which it's natural that could create kind of some hopelessness if you're a dog lover. But then my new thought, given all the evidence that I've evaluated, is it's true that the search for a golden retriever puppy has been difficult. But it could be that it's primarily due just to this season of COVID, and that won't last forever. So trying to kind of help my mind not think in these like finality terms, but just be a little bit more flexible with, what else could be accurate in this situation. And so really, again, the goal is to be able to kind of zoom out and see what else is going on. And maybe my negative hot thought is not as accurate as I once thought it was. So again, these are our steps that we kind of walked through. It's pretty easy. Something I forgot to mention is we actually want to re-rate the intensity, right? That's the name of the 7th step. So once we have our new, more flexible thought, we then want to go back to, okay, so for me, I identified my emotion of hopelessness at an 8, right? An 8 out of 10. So once I have this new, more flexible thought, I wanted to re-rate the emotion that it elicited. So for me, because it's more flexible, because I know that this just could be a seasonal thing, and we might be able to get a dog later on, or or it could be that we just get a different dog or something like that. But in whatever case, after I reevaluated my emotion, I kind of put it at like a 4 or 5, so a little bit less. Not awesome. I don't want to feel hopelessness at a 4, right? But it's a lot better than 8. And the more you do this, the more your emotions can go down. And it's okay if you walk through this for the first time and your emotion's exactly the same, right? Okay, I was feeling really anxious. I was at a 9 and I'm still at a 9. Well, that's okay. But I think the more that you do this, the stronger your kind of flexible thought muscles will be. And then you'll be able to start to decrease some of the intensity of the emotion that you're feeling at that time. So that's the goal, right? Is to kind of try to de-escalate some of the more negative emotions that we're feeling and trying to help kind of our brain think differently about the world. So again, these are the steps that we walked through. And then, we'll take time for questions. So, this is my contact information if you would like to, email me, but I did want to open up the floor for questions. And again, all the unmuting stuff, I think you can unmute yourselves, but if you can't, just tell me and I can unmute you. So anyone have any questions or comments about what we walked through? Okay. Well, if you think of something later on, please feel free to email me. These are our social media accounts. I put them up here because I usually, put on there a few days before the Wellness Wednesdays of what we're going to talk about today. So if you are curious, please just let me know, and you can actually follow along on these accounts and kind of figure out what we're going to talk about. So that's for that. And then in case you were interested, kind of going fast forward a few weeks past my my situation, we actually were able to get a dog. You notice this is a Chihuahua, so it's not my golden retriever dream pup. But his name is Cricket, and he was a rescue pup. So we were able to get him a few weeks ago. And so, my husband is in cloud 9 because of him, but he's actually very sweet. So, and if you've been hearing jingling in the background, that's him going crazy with his toys. So I'm sorry about that. But this is sweet little Cricket. So it worked out for us. These are some resources that we have at Clemson. And yeah, so hopefully they're, if you ever need them, they'd be helpful for you. And you can see there's some for students and then employees as well. Yeah, so that's basically all I had for you all today. You notice that we are recording this. And so, I'm still in the process of getting things online, but once I get them all online, I can email it out, or I can email you all and let you know that. But otherwise, if you don't have any other questions, that's it for today. So I'll stop sharing my screen and okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you have